This is a CTV News special presentation. The Year in Politics, an interview with Premier Brad Wall.
Good evening, I'm Heather Anderson, this is Wayne Mantyka, and we are joined by a very special guest tonight. Premier Brad Wall is here to reflect on the year that was and look ahead to 2015. Good evening, Mr. Premier.
Good evening.
So we want to start off and reflect a little bit on 2014. Every year you come to CTV and sit down with us and we talk about the year that was. Are you where we thought we would be a year ago when we last chatted?
In many respects, yes. We were hopeful at the start of last year that our economy would remain strong. And throughout the year, we posted, the lowest unemployment rate in the country. Actually, we're in our 24th consecutive month of having the lowest unemployment rate in Canada. We added more people. We attracted more people to our province. Population continued to grow. And we continued to set records in terms of job creation, in terms of job growth in the province. So that's good. And the reason why I would focus on the economic hopes that we had a year ago is that our government's vision is that growing economy is how we're going to afford quality of life things. It's how we can afford to fix more highways. We have a broadened tax base. A stronger economy lets us invest in long-term care. I'm sure we'll talk about that this evening. Or in acute care. It helps us build new schools or keep taxes lower, pay down debt. So if we can keep things growing at a reasonable and steady rate, as we saw in 2014, we have a chance then to enjoy the dividends of growth, invest in quality of life, and do these other things that I've just mentioned.
You've warned that 2015 could be a difficult year ahead. You're trying to keep this economic engine going with falling oil prices. How difficult is it going to be to do that?
Well, there'll be challenges, no doubt, but we have to remember in 2009 when oil touched $39 a barrel, and what was worse, the potash sales really collapsed. In fact, because of an anomaly, a weirdness in our potash tax system, we owed the companies money. And so we had a very difficult year in the budget. The provincial budget was balanced by the end of it, but we had to make some tough decisions. But what happened throughout 2009 is that the economy continued to grow. And what you've been hearing me say recently is that the provincial budget is one thing, the economy is another thing, and often they move in tandem, but sometimes they're delinked. That's what happened in 2009, and that's our plan for, or our hopes for, actually, in 2015, supported by our growth agenda, that we would see perhaps a tightness on the fiscal side where government's making some difficult decisions, but strong, steady growth for the economy. One final point. The oil sector, oil revenue, accounts for about 10% of the provincial revenues. So not an insignificant amount, but maybe less than what many people thought. And we've created 70,000 jobs since 2007. Less than 10% of those have come from the resource sector. We have a diversified economy. We have many sectors now that we rely on, and so we need to meet this challenge of falling prices. We need to balance the budget, and it'll be a challenge. But we have to remember that we have a diversified economy, and that's reason for cautious optimism, I think.
All right. Well, one topic that was being talked about, or wasn't being talked about a year ago, was seniors care. Now it is a major discussion in our province, and we're going to ask you about that when we return after a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning into this special edition of CTV News. Today we are reflecting on the year that was with Premier Brad Wall, and we want to turn our attention now to a very timely subject, seniors care. And to do that, we actually have a question from one of our viewers.
All right, so go ahead. Hi, my name is Ellie Richardson, and I have a question for Brad Wall. What are they going to do with the care for the seniors that are coming up? I'm a senior now, and I'm very concerned about it. I've been hearing things in the paper, and I know that some things do fall through the crack, but my concern is, where's the money going to come from for helping the baby boomers?
It's a great question, and it's not actually a new question. When we were first elected in 2007, we set out to try to deal with what we saw some deficiencies in terms of long-term care. So we hired over the intervening period of time 750 more frontline workers in long-term care than existed prior to the election. We reversed the process at the time had been, or the reality at the time had been the closing of long-term care beds. And so we began to build new long-term care facilities, 13 new ones in rural areas, a new one in Saskatchewan, one underway in Swift Current, in my home community, and more to come, more to be done. We recognize that there is more to be done in all of these areas because these stories have come forward, not just this year, but our MLAs have been reporting them even as we've invested more in long-term care in Saskatchewan. And so I think you'll see in the budget upcoming, even though it will be a tight budget, as we discussed before the break, we're going to need to find a way to redirect some more resources from, administration perhaps, some savings there, but focus them on the front line, on better long-term care. Because while we have made these investments and improvements in terms of the amount of resources available, these stories come forward because there are still challenges. There are 8,700 people in long-term care today in Saskatchewan. And so there are very many successful and positive stories about care that have happened through the years in Saskatchewan, regardless who the government happens to be. But we need to be focused that those are the reality for every single long-term care resident and patient. Even though some might say, well, that is going to be difficult to achieve. That needs to be our goal. It has been since 2007. That's why we've invested more resources, but we need to do more.
But despite those investments, people are still worried. They're concerned, especially those that are aging. There have been suggestions that we need a minimum staffing level in the homes. Perhaps we need a seniors ombudsman to a place where seniors could go if they have concerns. I mean, it's a very vulnerable segment of the population. We do have a children's advocate, so why not have one for seniors?
It's something we're looking at, Wayne. Our government moved towards having a separate healthcare ombudsman to look at specific healthcare cases. In fact, we've asked that healthcare ombudsman to look at some of the long-term care cases that have been brought forward, and we'll be going to be open to those recommendations. But we are looking now at how a seniors advocate might work here, how it works in other provinces. That's certainly part of it. And in terms of the resource piece, we have roughly the same complement of people in long-term care. And we have put 750 more long-term care workers on the front lines. 9% increase in care aides, 30% increase in licensed practical nurses. That's the system over. But just in long-term care, that 750 additional complement. So we also need to ask the question, are we deploying those resources most effectively in terms of making a priority of patient care? We all have family members and loved ones who are getting to the age where, or they're already of an age and already in care, where this is a top priority for Saskatchewan people, and we've certainly heard that loud and clear.
Now, switching gears, another big discussion this year was the SaskPower smart meters, and after a number of smart meter fires, your government was then prompted to stop the installation process and remove those that were already in place. But moving forward, your government plans to use the same company that first installed these SaskPower smart meters. Is that a wise choice?
Well, only if they can develop a meter that meets the climatic conditions of our province and that can be independently verified. First of all, you're right, our government noted the incidence of fires, and so we moved to have them removed. And then we sought to get the money back or keep taxpayers whole in terms of the investment that had been made in these smart meters. We've already gotten some of that money back, and the arrangement we have with the company is that they are going to develop, in partnership with the government, well, certainly under our watchful eye, develop a smart meter technology that we know will not have these problems. It must be independently verified by something like the Canadian Standards Association, CSA, or some third-party, well-reputed public lab or testing facility. And if they cannot meet our standards, we'll get the rest of the money back and we'll move on. But we did believe this was a way to recover some funds and also get a smart meter that'll work for the province. And I've said all along that we're going to be the kind of government that admits readily of mistakes, moves to clarify them. You remember we released a fully transparent report that highlighted what the challenge was. The president of SaskPower resigned, and we've taken steps to recover the resources for the people in terms of money spent on the meters and to make sure we have a meter that works. And if we don't have one that works from the company, we get the rest of the money back and we'll move on.
What about the millions of dollars that have already been lost throughout this?
Well, that's what we're going to be recovering. It's about a $47 million project we needed to make sure we are recovered, and 18 million of it, I think, in cash is already recovered. And there is a credit piece here, but we're only going to be purchasing from the company once an independent group says this meter will work for the province no matter the weather.
Your government has spent a lot of money this year and in the prior 2 years trying to determine how to save money in healthcare. You faced a lot of criticism over that. You are exiting your relationship with the consultants a little bit early in 2015. Why not just pull out now?
Well, while there's still results to be achieved for the healthcare system, we're going to proceed. I think the moment we don't see those results, and we are seeing them, though it's a subject for debate, and that's what the legislature is for, while we're seeing them, we're going to proceed. I think that's what we should do. We've saved over $60 million by applying lean in the healthcare system. We use it in other ministries of government. Lean is used by Fortune 500 companies and major medical facilities, hospitals the world over, and used effectively. The Mayo Clinic is interested in what we're doing in terms of lean because of the better patient care outcomes and also some efficiencies that can be gained. So yes, it's an investment, but we've recovered more than the investment through lean. First point. Second point is the moment we see that there's diminishing returns for the current contract, that we are exiting earlier, we might move out of that contract even earlier than the June of next year date that we currently have.
All right, we have lots more questions and much more to get to, so stay with us. We will be back with the Premier in just a moment. Welcome back. Thanks so much for tuning in to this special edition of CTV News.
And 2014 was a year of population growth fueled largely by immigration. And with that being said, we have another question from one of our viewers.
My name is Rafiq Buyan. My question is to Brad Wall. What about SINP, Saskatchewan Immigration Nominee Program, when he is going to restart it?
That issue's been around for a couple of years. The immigration nominee program rules were altered somewhat a couple of years ago, and there was a lot of concern from immigrant families that it became a little more difficult to bring the number of family members over to Canada that they had wanted to. So where are we going with this program?
Well, as you know, Wayne, immigration is shared jurisdiction in Canada. Under the Constitution, the province has a role to play and the federal government has a role to play, in many respects a superseding role in terms of citizenship and visas and this sort of thing. The federal government made some changes to the SINP program. The viewer is absolutely right, you're right, that we didn't necessarily agree with, but there wasn't a lot of room for adjustment or change in the federal position. So we actually worked towards some improvements in what originally had been proposed by the federal government. And I think the proof's in the pudding. With credit to the federal government, by the way, they've also been increasing the number of nominees we get, recognizing the labor shortage, recognizing the fact that we need more people in Saskatchewan. So our SINP, the nominees, since '07 when we formed government, are up over 200%. We're closing in on 5,000 a year. Just before Christmas, the federal government announced another discretionary increase for us. So some of the rules have changed. We weren't comfortable with all of them, but these were a change made by the federal government. And I think we made a few adjustments that helps the family equation a little bit, but probably not to the extent that the viewer would like. But this is what happens when you negotiate and work with the federal government. There's positive things like an increased number and some challenges around rules they've changed for all provinces.
Mr. Premier, just recently, Perry Bellegarde was elected as Chief of the Assembly of First Nations. Now, I want to play a bit of his speech for you when he accepted as Chief of the AFN. So here it is.
Canada will no longer develop pipelines, no longer develop transmission lines or any infrastructure on our lands as business as usual. That is not on. Canada is Indian land. This is my truth. And this is the truth of our peoples.
Now, as you heard there, Bellegarde took a very firm tone when talking about resource sharing. What does this say about ongoing relations between the government and First Nations?
Well, we want to be working together. You know, our government has partnered with our own FSIN to work on educational issues. We have a gap on the graduation side between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, and we've invested historically as a government to close that gap, and we're seeing some good results that we want to expand. That was an area that saw increased resources in the last budget. We've increased funding to institutions like the Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technologies because they have a great track record of connecting graduates with jobs in the economy, and they offer great programs. We've increased that by over 80% because of the results. So I hope there's an indication there of our willingness to work together on some issues that are very important, not just to Aboriginal people, but to all of us in the province. However, we campaign on a very clear position. It is the position of the Saskatchewan Party government of this province that the resource revenues of Saskatchewan belong to everyone equally, and we already all share in revenue from resources. There is already resource revenue sharing for all people, regardless of whether they're in a particular identifiable group. So when we build a highway, that's revenue sharing for all. When we invest in a new school in Regina that is attended by off-reserve children and non-Aboriginal children alike, that's revenue sharing. And we maintain that's the position. We believe it's constitutional. It's been supported in the courts, by the way, that the position of the government, and it remains the position of the government. There will be no special deals for any group, no matter the group. The revenue belongs to everyone equally.
One of the major priorities of your government has been revamping liquor laws, and in particular the retailing of liquor. Why tamper with a system that has been around for decades and is actually profitable? It is bringing money in for Saskatchewan taxpayers.
Well, you know, I don't think it's ever good enough to continue with something just because that's the way we've always done it. I think we should always be looking at improvement. And you know, in Alberta, we saw when they moved away from the government as the exclusive retailer of, in terms of the larger stores anyway, the urban stores of alcohol and beer, they saw their revenues increase not very long after that. And so remembering that government will always be the regulator, will control the markup, will have taxation policy, and I think should maintain the wholesaling role no matter what happens down the road, will be able to ensure that the system remains profitable, I think, to the extent it is today. But I don't want to spend any more money on liquor stores. And in a growing province, you know, there's times when the liquor board will come, the liquor authority will come and say, look, this neighborhood's grown and our math works out that we can justify a new store here. In years past, that would be a government store. And we're saying we should save our money for bricks and mortar, for hospitals, schools. We should build highways. Let's have a competitive process and let the private sector open up those new stores. That's the policy today. We're in a process of consultation as to whether that should go further or go back to the way it was. And whatever happens, I can commit you this, if we're going to change our current position, which we campaigned on, we will do so in an election campaign so people know, and we'll seek a mandate to do it first.
All right, and we'll be asking you about the election, upcoming election when we return in a moment. Stay with us, more with the Premier when we return. Welcome back. Premier Brad Wall is joining us with a special edition of CTV News. Looking ahead to 2015, now that we've talked so much about 2014, it could be a run-up to an election these next 12 months. What are we expecting to see from your government?
Well, we're going to deal with the budget first, and there will be challenges there because of the price of oil. And like we've already discussed, I mean, there's mitigating factors against that being providing too much pressure, but there'll be challenges to meet, and we're going to. We've had 7 consecutive balanced budgets in the province. That needs to continue. That underpins our growth agenda. That's one of the strengths of Saskatchewan right now, and that's why we have a AAA credit rating from 2 different agencies, and I think we want to continue down that path. And you know, there will be more debate because the election's coming likely in the spring of 2016. Could be earlier, depends on the federal government.
Is that a big priority for your government, of course, looking forward to that election and knowing that it is now just right around the corner?
It's hard not to focus on an election if you're in politics. It's a little bit like Thanksgiving coming at a bunch of turkeys. All of us in politics see it coming, and we know we have to be ready for it. We passed set election legislation that would normally mean the election would be in November of 2015, of this next year coming up. But because of the federal election coming at that time, we've moved it by legislation and by agreement in the House and the legislature to the spring of 2016. Either way, there'll be more politics, certainly, but hopefully it's constructive. Hopefully it's about the issues that people want dealt with in the run-up to an election and during that campaign.
And we have one final question from our viewers. It's an issue that just doesn't go away, and here it is.
Hi, my name is Ryan McDonald, and my question for Brad Wall is, why would we upgrade a stadium with no roof that it's only open 6 months of the year for another stadium with no roof that's only open 6 months of the year?
He wants a roof. and unless Santa brought $100 million to Mayor Fougere or the government of Saskatchewan, and I don't think he did, I'm not sure we'll be able to do that. This discussion continues to happen, but there's no money trees being planted anytime soon, I don't think, so I'm not sure it's on. Other places have built state-of-the-art outdoor facilities, and we'll build one here for certain in Saskatchewan for the riders and other events as well, and we're looking forward to that opening years down the road.
We'd like to give you your chance now to send your holiday greetings to the people of Saskatchewan, so go ahead, Mr. Premier.
Thanks. Well, thanks to both of you, first of all, and Merry Christmas. I hope you've had an excellent Christmas. On behalf of Tammy and our oldest Megan, her fiance now Kyle, our son Coulter and our daughter Faith, and on behalf of all of us in the Legislative Assembly, the Government of Saskatchewan, I hope you did have a great Christmas and all the best for a healthy and happy 2015.
Don't think we can end the show without talking about cars. And last year we talked about the Shelby Mustang that you restored. I understand this year you've got another project on the go. This one a more personal one, just for yourself.
Well, there's actually a couple. There's a 51 Ford I'm working on right now that was Ben Heppner's dad's car. Ben was one of our former MLAs who passed away, and it's coming along. There might be another charity project coming, Wayne, that you probably know a little bit about. In terms of Saskatchewan journalists, you seem to have the inside scoop on all the car ones, among other stories. But I think you're going to see another charity project come forward that might involve the RCMP and be a pretty special old Mopar muscle car that we're quietly working on.
Might have a flashing red light on top?
Well, I don't know if you'd want a flashing red light on a Charger because normally it might be a Charger. I think I might have let something slip. Normally the flashing red lights are chasing those kinds of cars.
So this 51 Ford that you're working on, how do you think that new green rider plate would look on that car?
I'm going to get one, absolutely. I'm going to get the new collector plate for the 51. And something else that's coming down the road in our province is something called Year of Manufacture Licenses. So lots of collectors, women and men, have the actual year of their car plate available. They've collected it or they have it in their garage. It's up on the wall. We'll be able to license those now soon. So people can phone those in and have those Saskatchewan plates from 67 or 51, if you've got one, as your plate for your vehicle.
Very interesting. All right. Well, that wraps up our 2014 year-end interview with Premier Brad Wall. Thank you so much, Mr. Premier, for coming in, answering our questions, and sitting down with us today.
Thanks. Happy New Year.
Have a happy holiday, everyone. Thanks very much for tuning in. Good night.